She wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't supposed to notice. But when Jamaica's richest designer met a masked stranger in a dress of pure magic, the past, the lies, and a buried legacy all came crashing back. By the time he learned her name, it was already too late. Welcome to Life in Stories, where emotions wear silk, love hides behind masks, and every heartbeat becomes a plot twist. If you believe stories can make you feel again, subscribe and never miss the next one. In the heart of Kingston, where the ocean breeze carried both the scent of salt and ambition, stood the glass tower of Washington Haute Couture. The name shimmered in gold above the entrance like a crown, the empire of William Washington, the 35-year-old billionaire whose designs had conquered red carpets and royal banquets. His world was stitched in silk and discipline, every seam perfect, every detail intentional. William was a man of elegance and precision. Born in Montego Bay to a seamstress mother and a fisherman father, he had risen from modest beginnings through relentless determination. From a tiny room with a rusted sewing machine, he had built a global brand that defined sophistication in women's ball gowns. Critics called him a visionary. His employees called him a perfectionist. To William, success wasn't about money. It was about legacy. He lived alone in a sprawling mansion overlooking the Caribbean Sea, a home that reflected both his wealth and his isolation. The marble floors echoed with silence, and though there were servants, only one ever lingered in his mind: Maria Clark, his 28-year-old maid. Maria was quiet, efficient, and humble. Her dark skin glowed with a quiet grace, and her deep brown eyes carried the kind of sadness that words couldn't capture. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, and when she did, her voice was soft, musical, like the hum of a distant lullaby. William often wondered why someone so refined had chosen domestic work. There was an unspoken dignity in the way she moved, her posture, her gentle hands, her composed demeanor. It all hinted at a past far greater than her present position. William, however, never asked. He wasn't the kind of man who indulged in curiosity about his staff. His life was divided between work, deadlines, and designs. Emotions had no place in his schedule. Each morning, Maria would polish the silver, sweep the grand staircase, and prepare his breakfast precisely at 7. She would leave freshly brewed Blue Mountain coffee on the terrace, where William often sat sketching gowns inspired by the sunrise. He would sometimes glance up to find her arranging flowers in the hallway. Always lilies, her favorite. What neither of them knew was that their lives were quietly sewing themselves into a single faded tapestry. One Friday morning, the hum of conversation filled the design floor at Washington Haute Couture. Assistants buzzed around, fabrics in hand, talking about the upcoming masked ball gala, an event jointly organized by the top fashion brands in the Caribbean and Europe. It was a competition of beauty and imagination. Designers would showcase their most breathtaking ball gowns, and the winner would walk away with $50,000 and the world's attention. William had been chosen to co-host the event. His designs were expected to steal the show, as always. But for him, it wasn't about the prize. It was about innovation, pushing boundaries, creating something that hadn't existed before. That evening after the meeting, William returned home later than usual. He walked into his mansion, exhausted yet restless. Maria, as always, had prepared dinner, callaloo soup and baked snapper. "Good evening, sir," she greeted softly, her tone respectful but distant. "Evening, Maria," he replied absently, loosening his tie. He noticed the faint sparkle of a pearl necklace peeking from beneath her simple maid uniform. For a moment, he thought it looked oddly expensive, something a woman of her means shouldn't possess. But he dismissed the thought. When she left the dining room, he leaned back in his chair, staring at the crystal chandelier above him. Despite all his wealth, he couldn't remember the last time he'd shared dinner with anyone out of affection rather than obligation. His world revolved around fabric and fame, but lately, he felt something missing. In her small room behind the east wing, Maria sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling slightly as she opened a wooden box she kept hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside lay a stunning ball gown, a masterpiece of ivory satin and hand-stitched lace, adorned with delicate pearl embellishments. It shimmered faintly in the dim light, like moonlight captured in silk. Beside it rested a set of pearl jewelry and a faded photograph of a smiling woman. Her mother, Amelia Clark, a renowned fashion designer who had once been the pride of their family. Maria had grown up in luxury, surrounded by art and creativity. But after her mother's death, everything changed. Her uncles, greedy and ruthless, had manipulated legal documents, taking control of the family estate. They threw her out, claiming she was unfit to inherit. She left the mansion with nothing but this gown, her mother's last design, and the jewelry that symbolized love, not wealth. For years, Maria worked as a maid to survive, never revealing her true background. Yet, the spark of creativity still lived in her heart. When she overheard the news about the masked ball gala while cleaning the living room earlier that week, her pulse quickened. The event was open to the public, and anyone could attend in disguise. She thought of her mother's gown, of the chance to honor her legacy. That night, as the moon rose high above the Caribbean Sea, Maria made her decision. She would go to the ball, not as a maid, but as the woman her mother raised her to be. Meanwhile, in his study, William reviewed sketches of his latest collection. His assistant had mentioned the gala's theme, elegance reimagined. He wanted to design something that would redefine grace itself, yet every draft felt hollow, too polished, too expected. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. For the first time in years, inspiration eluded him. He found himself glancing toward the window, where he could faintly see Maria's silhouette through the faint glow of her room's light. He didn't know why, but he wondered what she was doing. Perhaps she was reading, perhaps sleeping, or perhaps, like him, she was chasing a dream she could never quite reach. He shook off the thought and returned to his sketches, unaware that destiny was quietly threading their fates together. Days passed. The mansion buzzed with preparations for the upcoming gala. William's designers worked around the clock, sewing gowns worth fortunes. Maria, meanwhile, had secretly arranged for a friend to help her with hair and makeup for the ball. She saved every penny she could to rent a small taxi that would take her there. By the night before the gala, both of them lay awake, one surrounded by silk and success, the other by memory and hope. Two souls living under the same roof, each dreaming of something beyond their reach. One sought beauty in perfection, the other sought truth in survival. Neither imagined that in just a few days their worlds would collide under the glow of chandeliers and masks, and that a single gown stitched in love and loss would change both their lives forever. The night of the masked ball gala arrived like a storm of elegance and anticipation. The venue, the Kingston Grand Hall, glittered like a palace beneath cascading chandeliers. Gold drapes framed marble columns, and the air carried a symphony of laughter, champagne, and whispered ambition. Every corner gleamed with sequins and satin. The world's top designers had gathered to showcase dreams stitched into fabric. William Washington stood near the grand staircase, impeccably dressed in a custom black tuxedo and a golden half-mask. Cameras followed his every movement. He was, after all, not just a host, but a legend. Beside him, reporters buzzed like bees around honey. "Mr. Washington, how does it feel to be co-hosting tonight's event?" one of them asked. He smiled politely. "It's an honor. Fashion is more than luxury. It's storytelling. Tonight, we celebrate those stories. The applause that followed was almost rehearsed. But behind the glamour, William's thoughts drifted. For weeks, inspiration had eluded him. His sketches felt lifeless, his designs repetitive. He had come tonight not to compete, but to find that elusive spark, the feeling that had once driven him to create. As the orchestra began to play a soft waltz, William descended the stairs. He greeted other designers, exchanged pleasantries with celebrities, but his mind wandered through the sea of colors and masks. He was searching for something, though he didn't yet know what. Across town, in a modest apartment, Maria Clark stood before a mirror. Her heart thundered in her chest. The gown, her mother's masterpiece, fit as if it had been made for this night. The ivory satin shimmered like moonlight. The lace sleeves hugged her arms in a whisper of grace. The pearls around her neck caught the candlelight, glistening like tears frozen in time. She adjusted her silver mask and exhaled deeply. "Mama," she whispered, staring at her reflection, "tonight I'll make you proud." Her taxi honked outside. Clutching a small purse, she left quietly, unaware that fate was waiting just beyond those ballroom doors. When Maria stepped into the Kingston Grand Hall, the world seemed to stop. Eyes turned. Conversations faltered. Even the orchestra seemed to soften its tune. The gown she wore was unlike anything there, a design that blended old-world grace with modern delicacy. The train flowed like liquid silk, and the pearl details caught the chandelier's glow in a dance of light. She was not just beautiful, she was unforgettable. William noticed her immediately. He had been speaking with a fellow designer when his gaze caught the shimmer of ivory across the room. The woman in the gown moved with quiet confidence, her head high, her smile soft yet distant. Her mask hid most of her face, but her eyes, deep, dark, and alive, drew him like gravity itself. "Who's that?" he asked his assistant under his breath. "No idea," the assistant replied. "But that gown, my God, it's exquisite." William's pulse quickened. He had seen thousands of dresses in his career, but none like this. The craftsmanship, the originality, it spoke to him. He had to know who designed it. Maria, unaware of the attention she had drawn, walked through the hall in awe. It had been years since she had felt like she belonged anywhere. Tonight, among the world's finest, she wasn't a maid. She was her mother's daughter, a designer's heir wearing the last piece of her legacy. As she approached the ballroom center, a familiar voice stopped her. "Excuse me," said a man, deep and refined. She turned, and there he was. William Washington himself, his mask half shadowing his face, but his sharp features unmistakable. For a moment, Maria froze. She had cleaned his study, ironed his suits, polished his trophies. Now he stood before her, unaware that she was his maid. "That gown," he said softly, his eyes studying every thread. "It's extraordinary." "May I ask, who designed it?" Maria swallowed hard, her heart pounding. She hadn't expected to meet him like this. "It was my mother's design," she said carefully. "A gift." William tilted his head, intrigued. "Your mother must be a remarkable designer. The structure, the detailing, it's timeless. Which house did she work for?" "She didn't," Maria said, her voice trembling slightly. "She designed from her heart. She believed fashion was more than appearance. It was memory." He smiled faintly. "A philosophy I can respect. May I know the name of the woman who wears such art?" Maria hesitated. If she told him, everything would unravel. Her secret, her job, her fragile peace. She looked toward the entrance and spotted her taxi driver gesturing impatiently. Time was slipping away. She began. But before she could speak, the announcer's voice filled the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The showcase begins in 5 minutes." The moment broke. William glanced toward the stage, then back at her, but she was already stepping away. "Wait," At least tell me your name, he called. She turned briefly, her eyes meeting his. Just call me M. Clark, she said softly, then disappeared into the crowd. The showcase began with flair. Designers presented their collections, each more extravagant than the last. William watched, but his mind was elsewhere, on the mysterious woman and her gown. He couldn't stop thinking about the perfection of that design, the quiet emotion it carried. It was the kind of work that came from love, not ambition. Hours later, when the judges announced the best design of the night, the room fell silent. "The winner," the announcer declared, "goes to the breathtaking gown worn by attendee number 47, registered as M. Clark." Gasps filled the hall. Cameras flashed. Reporters rushed forward, eager to capture the story, but the stage remained empty. "Where is Miss Clark?" the announcer asked, looking around. No one answered. Maria was already gone, racing through the night in her taxi, heart pounding, tears in her eyes. She hadn't stayed for the glory or the money. For her, it was enough to have honored her mother's art, even if no one knew her name. Meanwhile, William stood frozen in disbelief. M. Clark. He repeated the name in his mind. The gown's image was burned into his memory, the flow of the fabric, the elegance of its soul. He felt something he hadn't felt in years, wonder. And for the first time, he wanted to chase it. When the event ended, he walked out into the cool night air, the sea breeze brushing his face. The lights of Kingston shimmered below like 1,000 stars. He looked toward the dark horizon, whispering to himself, "Who are you, Mr. Clark?" That night, as he returned to his mansion, Maria was already back, quietly folding linens as if nothing had happened. Her mask was gone, her gown hidden once more in its box. When William passed by her in the hall, neither spoke. But as their eyes briefly met, something flickered between them. An unspoken connection, a silent recognition neither could name. In his study, William poured himself a glass of wine and leaned against the window, watching the waves crash against the shore. He replayed the moment over and over, the woman, the gown, the mystery. He didn't yet know that the answer he sought was just a few rooms away. The morning sun crept over the horizon, painting Kingston in hues of gold and rose. Newspapers were already flying off stands with bold headlines. M. Clark's gown stuns at the masked ball gala, the design that redefined elegance. Photos of the gown, captured mid-spin under the ballroom lights, graced every front page. Critics called it a resurrection of timeless beauty and a love letter to craftsmanship. The name M. Clark was suddenly on everyone's lips, but no one knew who she was. Inside the Washington mansion, William sat at the breakfast table, the paper open before him. His coffee had long gone cold. His eyes lingered on the image of the gown, each pearl, each curve, each shimmer of satin. He couldn't stop thinking about her. "Maria," he murmured unconsciously. At the sound of her name, his maid entered the room, holding a tray of fresh fruit. "Yes, sir?" she asked softly. William blinked, realizing his slip. "Oh, nothing." "Thank you." Maria set the tray down carefully, keeping her eyes lowered. She had seen the papers, too. Her heart raced every time she caught the photograph of her gown. The gown that now belonged to the world's admiration. But the world didn't know who she was, and for now, that anonymity was her only safety. As she turned to leave, William's voice stopped her. "Maria, wait." She froze. "Yes, Mr. Washington?" He hesitated, unsure why he was even asking. "You heard about the winner of the gala, I suppose?" Maria's throat tightened. "Yes, sir." "I did remarkable gown," he said, his tone thoughtful. "It's strange, I can't recall ever seeing that designer's name before." "M. Clark. Do you happen to know anyone by that name?" Maria's heart thudded painfully. She forced a small, polite smile. "No, sir." "I'm afraid not." He studied her face, perhaps noticing the flicker in her eyes, but said nothing more. "All right," he said finally. "You can go." As she walked away, her hands trembled slightly. The secret between them felt heavier with every passing second. Over the next few days, William's fascination grew into an obsession. He had his team search every fashion registry, every design school, every record they could find. Yet there was no trace of Monsieur Clark. "This is impossible," he muttered in frustration, flipping through files in his office. "A design like that doesn't come from nowhere." His assistant, a sharp woman named Julia, shrugged helplessly. "Maybe she's a newcomer, sir. Or perhaps she wants to remain anonymous." "It's not unheard of." William leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He wasn't just intrigued by the design anymore. He was drawn to the mystery, the emotion it carried. It felt familiar somehow, though he couldn't explain why. At night, he dreamed of the masked woman. He saw her moving through the crowd, her gown glowing like starlight, her voice echoing softly. "Just call me Ms. Clark." He woke up restless, haunted. Meanwhile, Maria continued her duties as if nothing had changed, though inside she lived in constant anxiety. The victory meant everything to her. It was validation for her mother's art, but it also risked exposing her identity. If William discovered the truth, she might lose her job, her peace, and whatever fragile safety she had built. Still, when she polished the silver or ironed his suits, she caught him watching her sometimes. His gaze was distant, searching, as though he were trying to piece together a puzzle. One evening, while dusting the piano in the parlor, she overheard him on a call. "Yes, I want her found," he said firmly. "Offer her the full prize and an invitation to present at our next showcase. Whoever M. Clark is, she deserves to be known." Maria's chest tightened. The prize, $50,000, could change everything for her. But the thought of standing in front of William, revealing that she was the mystery designer, terrified her. She wasn't ready, not yet. 3 days later, a public announcement went out from Washington Haute Couture, prize presentation ceremony, this Sunday at the Kingston Grand Hall. The official winner, Monsieur Clark, is requested to appear in person to claim the prize and recognition for her breathtaking design. The notice spread across the city like wildfire. William waited with growing anticipation, and Maria knew she couldn't hide forever. That night, she opened the wooden box again, running her fingers over the gown's delicate fabric. "Mama," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "I didn't mean to hide you." I was just afraid she knew what she had to do. The day of the prize presentation arrived. The hall was once again alive with reporters, designers, and flashing cameras. William stood on stage beside the host, his expression calm but expectant. The announcer stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered to celebrate the brilliance behind the most breathtaking gown of the season. Please welcome the mysterious designer, M. Clark." The crowd turned. At first, no one appeared. Then, from the back of the hall, a woman walked forward, dressed in a simple cream dress, her head held high. No mask this time, just honesty. William's heart stopped. It was Maria, his maid. She approached the stage gracefully, though her hands trembled. The murmurs in the audience grew louder, a wave of surprise and disbelief. William stared at her, his mind reeling. "Maria?" he whispered. She met his gaze steadily. "Yes, sir." What are you doing here?" "I came to claim the prize," she said quietly. "I'm Maria Clark, M. Clark." For a moment, silence blanketed the hall. Then the announcer, realizing what was happening, smiled uncertainly. "Well, congratulations, Miss Clark. A truly inspiring revelation." The crowd erupted in applause. though William barely heard it. He couldn't look away from her. His maid, the woman who had quietly polished his tables and ironed his shirts, was the genius behind the gown that had shaken the fashion world. After the ceremony, he found her standing alone by the balcony, gazing at the sunset. He approached, still dazed. "Maria," he began softly, "I need you to explain. How is any of this possible?" She turned, her eyes shimmering with both pride and sorrow. "It was my mother's design," she said. "Amelia Clark. She was a designer once, before my uncles stole everything from us. They threw me out with nothing but this gown and the pearls she left me." William's expression softened. "So the gown, it wasn't just art. It was your memory of her." She nodded. "I didn't enter for the money. I just wanted her work to be seen again." He studied her in silence for a long moment. Then, gently, he said, "You deserve far more than a prize, Maria." When she smiled faintly, a tear slipped down her cheek. "All I ever wanted was justice, for her and for what they took." William's jaw tightened. "Then I'll help you get it." She blinked, startled. "You would do that?" He nodded firmly. "I'll hire the best lawyers in Jamaica if I have to." "You're not just my employee anymore, Maria. You're a designer, an artist, and I don't let talent like yours get buried by cruelty." Maria didn't know what to say. Gratitude and disbelief tangled in her chest. For the first time when she looked at William, she didn't see just a billionaire or her boss. She saw the man beneath the empire, and he, for the first time, saw her not as a maid, but as the woman who had reminded him what beauty truly meant. The days that followed the revelation at the Kingston Grand Hall were unlike anything either William or Maria had experienced before. The world was captivated by the story. News outlets buzzed with the tale of the maid who stunned the fashion world. Some called it destiny, others called it scandal. But to William, it was something far deeper. He couldn't shake the image of Maria standing on that stage, dignified, vulnerable, yet radiant with truth. At the mansion, life had changed overnight. Maria was no longer just the quiet maid who moved like a shadow through the halls. She was the woman whose creation had reminded an empire what art truly meant. Yet she carried herself with the same humility, the same soft voice, and the same quiet strength. William, however, was different. He found himself drawn to her in ways that unsettled him. When she entered a room, his focus shifted. When she spoke, he listened. And when she smiled, a rare, fragile smile, it stirred something deep in him that no amount of wealth or fame ever had. One evening, a week after the prize ceremony, William invited Maria to join him in the study. The air was heavy with the scent of oak and old paper. "Maria," he began, motioning for her to sit, "I've been thinking about what you told me, about your uncles, about what they did." She hesitated before sitting across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "They took everything, Mr. Washington. The house, the business, even my mother's old designs. They said I wasn't capable of managing the family legacy." William's jaw tightened. "You were the rightful heir, weren't you?" "Yes, but they used lies and forged documents to take control." He leaned forward, his voice steady but filled with quiet determination. "Then we'll fight back. I've already contacted a law firm in Montego Bay, one of the best. They're willing to review your case." Maria's eyes widened. You did that for me?" He nodded. "You deserve justice, Maria. And your mother's name deserves to be restored." For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Emotion swelled in her throat, and tears shimmered in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "No one has ever believed in me like this before." William smiled faintly. "Then it's about time someone did." The legal process began almost immediately. William personally accompanied Maria to meetings with the attorneys. guiding her through documents and testimonies. The case was complicated, years of deception buried under false signatures and missing records. But William refused to give up. His dedication surprised even Maria. He wasn't doing it for publicity. He kept the matter out of the media entirely. It was personal. Every time he saw the fire of determination in her eyes, he felt his own purpose reignite. During those long evenings in his office, as they went over evidence, William often found himself studying her, not just her beauty, but her resilience. She spoke with a grace that came from hardship, and when she smiled through her pain, it disarmed him completely. One night, as they worked late, the rain began to fall, soft against the windows. The power flickered briefly, casting shadows over the papers. Maria looked up and laughed softly. "Seems even the weather's tired," she said. Her laughter, gentle and warm, filled the quiet room. William couldn't help but smile. "It's a welcome sound," he said. She tilted her head. "What is?" "Your laugh," he replied. "This house. It's been too quiet for too long." Their eyes met across the desk, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Maria looked away, her cheeks flushing. "Mr. Washington, you've done so much already." "I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head. "Call me William." "William," she repeated softly, the word almost trembling on her lips. It was the first time she'd said his name that way, and something inside him shifted. Weeks turned into months. The case dragged on, but progress came slowly and surely. William's lawyers uncovered a trail of fraud, documents altered by her uncles, assets stolen, letters forged. The court date was set. On the morning of the trial, Maria stood outside the courthouse in a simple navy dress. The wind tugged at her hair, and her hands trembled despite her calm face. William stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "You ready?" he asked. She nodded, exhaling deeply. "For my mother." "I have to be inside." The courtroom buzzed with tension. Her uncles sat at the defense table, their smug expressions faltering when they saw who accompanied her. William Washington's presence carried weight. His reputation alone silenced whispers. The proceedings lasted hours, each testimony peeling back years of deceit. When Maria finally took the stand, her voice didn't shake. "My mother believed that art has a soul," she told the court. "She taught me that every design, every stitch, carries memory." What my uncles did wasn't just theft of property. It was theft of her legacy. Her words hung in the air like a song, raw and powerful. William watched her from the gallery, his chest swelling with pride. She was no longer the timid maid he'd once known. She was the woman her mother had raised, brave, intelligent, and unbreakable. When the verdict was announced days later, the ruling was clear. Maria Clark was reinstated as the rightful heir to the Clark estate and fashion rights. Tears streamed down her face as she turned to William, who stood beside her in quiet triumph. "You did it," he said softly. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "We did." After the case, Maria returned to the mansion for one final evening before moving temporarily to Montego Bay to restore her mother's home. She found William on the terrace, looking out at the sea. The sunset burned orange and gold across the horizon. "I don't know how to thank you," she said as she approached. He smiled faintly, his eyes never leaving the ocean. "You already did. You reminded me what fashion, what life is really about." She stepped closer, the wind catching her hair. "And what's that?" He turned to her, his gaze soft. "Heart. Without it, all the fabric in the world is just cloth." Maria looked at him for a long moment, her heart trembling with emotions she didn't want to name. "You've changed, William." He chuckled quietly. "Maybe you've just helped me remember who I used to be." The silence between them was charged, fragile, almost sacred. The air seemed to hum with something unspoken. "Will you come back?" he asked finally, his voice gentle. "I will," she said, "but not as your maid." He smiled, stepping closer. "No, as a designer, as my equal." Their eyes locked, two souls who had built walls of work and pain, now finding home in each other's presence. As the last light faded, William reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You know," he said softly, "when I saw you at that ball, I thought your gown was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen." "And now?" she whispered. "Now," he said, his hand lingering near her cheek. "I know it wasn't the gown. It was the woman who wore it." That night, Maria left for Montego Bay with a promise to return. And when she did, the tides of both their lives would shift again. This time, not through fashion or fame, but through something far deeper, something that neither of them had dared to design. The Clark estate in Montego Bay had once been a shell of its former glory. Its gardens overgrown, its walls faded, and its rooms heavy with silence. But under the golden warmth of the Jamaican sun, Maria Clark returned to reclaim not only the property, but the memories it held. For months, she poured herself into restoring her mother's legacy. She reopened Amelia Atelier, the design studio her mother had once run, transforming it into a haven for young designers who couldn't afford formal education. The house became alive again, with laughter, with the hum of sewing machines, with the scent of blooming hibiscus from the garden. And every few days, letters arrived from Kingston, from William Washington. At first, they were simple updates, legal paperwork, business discussions. But as time went on, the tone shifted. His words became warmer, softer, more personal. "The mansion feels emptier without your quiet footsteps. Your laugh still echoes in my mind. I find myself sketching again, and it's all because of you." Maria would read those words late at night under the glow of a small lamp, her fingers tracing his handwriting. Each letter was a reminder that though distance separated them, something deeper connected them still. 3 months later, William visited Montego Bay. When he stepped out of his sleek black car and saw the restored Clark estate, he was stunned. The mansion gleamed again, surrounded by gardens alive with color. A sign above the entrance read, "Amelia Atelier, Designs with a Soul." Maria emerged from the doorway, dressed in a flowing teal dress that caught the sunlight. Her smile, soft, genuine, stole his breath. "Welcome to my mother's home," she said, her voice filled with pride. William's gaze softened. "You've done something remarkable, Maria." She shrugged lightly. "I just followed her vision." "No," he said quietly. "You made it your own." They walked through the house together, the air thick with nostalgia. Photographs of Amelia Clark hung on the walls. Her sketches, her gowns, her smile immortalized in black and white. Maria paused before one portrait where Amelia stood holding the ivory gown, the same one that had changed everything. William stepped beside her. "You honored her," he said. Maria's eyes glistened. "She taught me everything. But it was you who reminded me I still had something to fight for." He looked at her, really looked at her, the way her eyes shimmered when she spoke of her mother, the way strength and gentleness intertwined in her. "And you reminded me that work without heart is just noise," he said softly. For a moment, neither spoke. The world outside faded into bird song and the whisper of wind through palm leaves. Then William reached into his pocket and drew out a small velvet box. Maria's breath caught. "William." He opened it to reveal a simple yet elegant ring, a gold band set with a single pearl. "Your mother's design inspired me once," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you, Maria, inspire me every day. You gave me back my purpose." My heart, tears welled in her eyes as he knelt before her. "Maria Clark," he continued, "will you marry me? Will you let me walk beside you, not as your boss, not as your savior, but as your partner, your equal, your home?" Maria covered her mouth, overcome. The pearl in the ring shimmered like the ocean behind them, simple, timeless, pure. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. 1,000 times, yes." William stood, and when he kissed her, the world seemed to pause. The waves, the wind, even time itself bowing to the union of two souls stitched together by fate. News of their engagement spread like wildfire across the Caribbean and beyond. Fashion magazines called it the romance that redefined the runway. Critics who had once dismissed Maria now called her the new face of emotional design. But neither she nor William cared about the fame. They were too busy creating. Together, they launched a collaborative collection under both their names. Washington X Clark, Threads of Memory. Every gown in the collection told a story of love, of loss, of rebirth. Maria infused her designs with her mother's emotional artistry, while William added his signature precision and flair. The result was revolutionary. Their joint show in Paris drew standing ovations. Designers and celebrities wept openly at the beauty of it. Yet for all their success, their favorite moments were still the quiet ones. Late nights sketching together in their studio, walks along the beach, and dinners under the stars at the Clark estate. Their wedding took place a year later, at the very spot where they had first met, the Kingston Grand Hall. But this time, the stage was not for competition, but celebration. The ballroom sparkled with light, its walls draped in ivory and gold. Designers from around the world attended, each wearing gowns inspired by love rather than luxury. It was a gathering not of rivals, but of artists united by beauty. Maria walked down the aisle in a gown she designed herself, a modern reimagining of her mother's masterpiece. The ivory satin flowed like water, adorned with tiny pearls that caught the light with every step. Her veil was embroidered with the words, "To love is to remember." William stood waiting, his heart pounding, his eyes full of awe. When she reached him, he whispered, "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." She smiled softly. "So are you when you stop overworking." The crowd laughed warmly as the minister began the vows. When the words, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," were spoken, the hall erupted in applause. William pulled Maria close and kissed her under a rain of white petals and music. Cameras flashed, but they didn't see them. For them, the world had narrowed to a single heartbeat, shared between two people who had found each other through chaos and grace. Later that night, under the Caribbean moon, they escaped to the terrace, away from the noise of celebration. The ocean shimmered in the distance, calm and endless. Maria leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about how strange it all was?" she asked softly. "You, the billionaire designer." "Me?" Your maid William chuckled, brushing her hand with his. "Strange, yes. But maybe that's how fate works. It hides the best designs in unexpected fabrics." Maria smiled. "I like that." He turned to face her fully, his expression tender. "You changed my life, Maria. Before you, I only knew how to build an empire. Now I know how to build a home." She looked into his eyes, her heart swelling. "And you reminded me that even after loss, beauty can bloom again." They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars shimmer over the sea. Then, with a soft sigh, Maria whispered, "Mama would have loved this." William tightened his arm around her. "She's here," he said. "In every stitch, every design, every heartbeat of what we've created together." Maria smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Then let's keep creating. For her, for us." And beneath the silver moonlight, they kissed again. Two souls bound not just by love, but by art, courage, and the promise of a shared future. The waves crashed softly below, carrying away the last remnants of pain, leaving behind only peace, passion, and the sound of destiny fulfilled.
Thank you for watching Life in Stories, where every heartbeat tells a tale. If this story hit you, don't scroll. Subscribe. Another one's coming that'll hit even harder.